The Rooftop Secrets, Aurora Heights, Audiobook 4. Chapter 1, Elevation. Serena Cho had always believed that beauty was a language best spoken in silence. In her world of galleries and private collections, value was determined not by volume, but by restraint. The perfect exhibition whispered rather than shouted. The most powerful art demanded attention without ever asking for it. At 42, she had built her reputation on this philosophy. Museums across 3 continents trusted her eye. Collectors worth billions sought her counsel. Her name appeared in tasteful print beneath photographs of carefully lit sculptures and paintings that cost more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. She lived on the 47th floor of Aurora Heights, in a residence that resembled the galleries she curated. Clean lines, neutral tones, strategic emptiness that allowed each piece to breathe. Visitors often commented on how perfectly the space reflected her professional aesthetic. What they did not understand was that this was not curation. This was erasure. Serena had learned early that the self was best hidden behind beauty. Let others project their desires onto carefully chosen surfaces. Let them believe they understood you because they understood your taste. The truth could remain suspended in the space between what was shown and what was concealed. Tonight, like so many nights before, sleep would not come. She stood at her window, watching the city pulse 47 stories below. Elysium's city never truly darkened. It simply shifted palettes, trading daylight's harsh clarity for the softer deceptions of neon and sodium glow. From this height, individual lives disappeared into patterns of light and movement. Traffic became abstract. Humanity became design. Beautiful, distant, safe. The insomnia had started 6 months ago, coinciding with her move to Aurora Heights. Her doctor suggested stress. Her therapist mentioned transition anxiety. Serena knew better. The sleeplessness was not a symptom. It was recognition. Her carefully constructed life had become so perfectly controlled that it no longer required her participation. She had curated herself into irrelevance. She glanced at the clock. 1:15 in the morning. The rooftop would be empty now. Officially, access to Aurora Heights' rooftop garden was restricted to daylight hours. Security protocols, insurance requirements, resident safety. The elevator required a special key card to reach the 60th floor after 10 in the evening. Most residents never questioned this. They were accustomed to restrictions that protected their privacy and property values. Serena had discovered the override by accident 3 weeks earlier. A late conversation with Elias Gray, the building's quietly omniscient concierge, had revealed that senior residents could request extended access for special circumstances. He had processed her request without inquiry, his expression professionally neutral. If he wondered why a woman with no apparent need for rooftop access at midnight wanted the privilege, he kept those thoughts to himself. Elias Gray was exceptionally good at keeping thoughts to himself. Since then, the rooftop had become Serena's gallery of last resort, a space where she could stand without being observed, without needing to perform competence or compose herself into something aesthetically acceptable. The wind disrupted her carefully styled hair. The cold required no elegant response. The city sprawled below, indifferent to her presence. It was the only place in Aurora Heights where she felt real. She changed from silk pajamas into black cashmere and wool. Comfortable, warm, expensive, without announcing itself. Even in private rebellion, certain standards remained. She pulled her dark hair into a simple knot, applied nothing to her face, and slipped into soft leather boots that made no sound against marble floors. The elevator ascended in hushed mechanical whispers. Serena watched the numbers climb, each floor a kingdom unto itself. 48. The Ramirez family, oil wealth and art patronage. 51. Dorian Hale's fortified domain of technology and silence. 55. Livia Van Arden, political royalty playing power games Serena refused to enter. The doors opened at 60. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and distant rain. The rooftop garden stretched before her, a landscape of cultivated wildness. Trees grew in massive planters designed to withstand wind at this elevation. Gravel paths wound between architectural plantings. Seating areas offered views in every direction, positioned to maximize privacy while creating the illusion of openness. During daylight hours, this space photographed beautifully. At night, under minimal security lighting, it became something else entirely. Shadows pooled beneath structural elements. Glass panels reflected distorted versions of the city. The careful design revealed its artifice, becoming a stage set waiting for actors who would never arrive. Serena walked to the eastern edge, where a glass barrier protected residents from both wind and gravity. Below, the city continued its indifferent performance. Cars traced light along boulevards. Windows glowed in distant towers. Somewhere down there, people were falling in love, committing crimes, dying alone, celebrating victories that would mean nothing in a decade. From this height, it all looked the same. She closed her eyes and let the wind decide which thoughts to carry away. I had wondered who else knew about this place. The voice came from behind her, masculine and confident, carrying the particular tone of someone accustomed to being heard. Serena turned, adrenaline sharpening her senses, even as training smoothed her expression into polite inquiry. Victor Van Seren stood near the elevator entrance, hands in the pockets of an expertly tailored coat, watching her with undisguised interest. Of course it would be him. Mr. Van Seren, she said, voice level. I didn't realize the rooftop had multiple trespassers. His smile suggested he found her word choice entertaining. Technically, I can't trespass in a building my family owns. though I appreciate the implication that we're both breaking rules." He moved closer with the easy physicality of someone who had never questioned his right to occupy space. Not arrogance exactly, though that was present. More a fundamental assumption that the world would arrange itself favorably, because it always had. Victor Van Seren was 45, unmarried by choice rather than circumstance, and in possession of the kind of genetic advantage that allowed men to be described as aging well, while women faced different vocabulary. Dark hair silvering at the temples, strong features that photographs loved, the build of someone whose personal trainer was both expensive and effective. Serena knew his biography the way everyone in Aurora Heights knew the Van Seren family story. Old money made older through strategic investments and political connections. Victor's grandfather had developed half the city's waterfront. His father had expanded into media and technology. Victor himself sat on boards that decided which initiatives received funding and which promising careers received obstacles. He was handsome, powerful, and entirely aware of both facts. They had met twice before. Once at a building event she had attended out of obligation. Once in the lobby when coincidence had placed them near the elevator banks simultaneously. Both interactions had been brief and professionally cordial. Serena had registered his interest. Men like Victor always exhibited interest, and filed it away as irrelevant to her carefully managed existence. Now, at 1:30 in the morning, with the city spread beneath them and no witnesses present, that interest became considerably more complex. "How long have you been coming up here?" he asked, stopping at a respectful distance, close enough to continue conversation, far enough to suggest he understood boundaries. "A few weeks," Serena replied. "You?" "Years, since before the official closure. I convinced building management that restricting access was necessary after a resident complaint about noise." His smile turned slightly conspiratorial. "There was no complaint. I wanted privacy. And yet you're sharing it now. I'm revising my priorities." He gestured toward the eastern view. "May I?" She nodded, and he joined her at the barrier. They stood in silence, two people with nothing obvious in common except insomnia and altitude. "I attended your exhibition last year," Victor said eventually. "The one at the Hartwell Museum. Constructed Intimacies." Serena remembered. 3 months of work, 2 years of negotiation, and a critical reception that had added another layer of prestige to her already substantial reputation. The show had explored how artists manufactured emotional connection through deliberate aesthetic choices. Vulnerability as performance. Confession as control. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked, the question purely professional. "I found it unsettling," he said, which I assume was intentional. All good art should unsettle something, even when it exposes the viewer more than the work itself. She looked at him directly for the first time since he had approached. His expression was serious now, the practiced charm temporarily suspended. He was not flirting, though that would come. He was genuinely engaged with the question. Especially then, Serena said. If you left feeling seen, the art succeeded. And if I left feeling manipulated, then you understood the point perfectly. Victor laughed, a genuine sound that disrupted his careful presentation. You're saying all intimacy is manipulation. I'm saying all presentation is choice. Whether we call it manipulation or curation depends on whether we approve of the outcome. That's remarkably cynical for someone who works in beauty. Beauty and cynicism aren't opposites, Mr. Van Seren. Sometimes beauty is the most effective form of cynicism available. He studied her with renewed interest, and Serena recognized the shift. This was no longer polite conversation between neighbors. This was evaluation, assessment, the beginning of something that should be prevented before it developed momentum. She should leave, make an excuse, return to her carefully controlled apartment, and ensure their next encounter happened in daylight with other people present. Instead, she stayed. Why do you come up here? Victor asked. Someone with your eye for composition must find this. He gestured at the rooftop garden, aggressively designed. I do, she admitted. It tries too hard, but that's not why I'm here. Then why? Because it's the only dishonest place in the building. His eyebrows rose. How so? Everywhere else in Aurora Heights, people perform their lives. They present carefully curated versions of success, taste, status. The hallways, the lobby, even private residences, all of it is designed to communicate specific messages about who lives here and what they've achieved. She looked out at the city. But no one is supposed to be on this rooftop. There's no audience, no performance required. It's the only space in the building where the design admits it's a lie. Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried less performance, more genuine curiosity. And you need that. A place where the lie is acknowledged. Don't you? Instead of answering, he pulled a silver flask from his coat pocket. Whiskey, considerably better than whatever they serve at building functions. Interested, she should decline. Accepting drinks from powerful men on empty rooftops at nearly 2 in the morning represented several kinds of poor judgment. Please, she said. He handed her the flask. Their fingers brushed in transfer. Brief, meaningless, except nothing at this altitude felt meaningless anymore. The whiskey was indeed exceptional. Smoky and complex, the kind that cost more per bottle than most people spent on rent. She took a longer drink than strictly necessary and returned the flask. Thank you. Keep it, Victor said. I have others. I'm sure you do. This time his smile acknowledged the edge in her tone. You don't approve of me. I don't know you well enough to approve or disapprove. But you've made assumptions. Everyone makes assumptions about you, Mr. Van Seren. That's what happens when your family name is on the building. Victor, he corrected. And you're right. Everyone assumes they know exactly who I am. Entitled heir, corporate playboy, man who inherited power instead of earning it. He took a drink from the flask she had returned. The assumptions aren't entirely wrong, but they're not complete either. Nothing ever is. No, he agreed. Which is why I find you interesting, Ms. Cho. Serena. And I doubt I'm particularly interesting compared to your usual company. My usual company performs exactly as expected. Beautiful people saying beautiful things in beautiful spaces. Perfect, predictable, completely forgettable. He looked at her directly. You curate beauty for a living, but you come to the ugliest designed space in the building to find peace. That suggests complications I'd like to understand. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain that had not yet fallen. Serena pulled her coat tighter, buying time to construct a response. This conversation had already gone further than wisdom recommended. Victor Van Seren was exactly the kind of complication her carefully managed life could not accommodate. Powerful, perceptive, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with malice and everything to do with disruption. She should leave, now, before this moment calcified into pattern. I should go, she said, not moving. Should you? It's late. We both need sleep. Neither of us will sleep, Victor said. We'll go back to our separate floors and lie in expensive beds and watch the ceiling until dawn makes insomnia look like an early start. Or he let the alternative hang unspoken. Or we stay, talk, acknowledge that we're both here because everywhere else requires pretending we're not exhausted by our own lives. He paused. No expectations, no performance, just two people who happened to find the same exit from the same elegant prison. It was a good line, probably one he had used before, though she suspected not often. Men like Victor rarely needed to work this hard. The fact that he was trying suggested something she had not anticipated. Genuine interest, not conquest, not entertainment. Actual curiosity about who she was beneath the professional presentation. Serena recognized the danger immediately. She had built her entire adult life around being admired from a distance. Allowed people to appreciate her taste, her eye, her ability to recognize value. Never let them close enough to recognize that beneath the curation was a woman who no longer knew which parts of herself were real and which were simply well-chosen accessories. Victor was offering something more dangerous than seduction. He was offering to see her. 1 hour, she heard herself say. Then we both go back to our elegant prisons. His smile was warm and surprisingly free of triumph. 1 hour. They moved to one of the seating areas, designed for comfort, but rarely used. The furniture was high-end outdoor grade, built to withstand, whether while maintaining the aesthetic standards Aurora Heights demanded. Victor sat first, claiming space with unconscious privilege. Serena chose the opposite end of the curved bench, maintaining distance while accepting proximity. The flask moved between them as they talked, not about art or business, or the careful topics strangers used to fill silence. Victor asked about her childhood in Seoul, the decision to leave for education in America, the loneliness of building a life in a language that would never feel entirely native. She asked about the weight of legacy, what it meant to inherit expectations before developing preferences, how it felt to have your life's trajectory determined before you were old enough to question it. The conversation moved like good music, following unexpected progressions that somehow resolved into harmony. They discovered shared experiences despite vastly different circumstances. The performance of competence when uncertainty screamed beneath. The isolation of being admired for achievements that felt increasingly hollow. The suspicion that everyone else had received instructions for living that they had somehow missed. Victor spoke about his father with complicated affection. A man who built empires but forgot to build relationships, who provided everything except presence. Serena described her mother, a woman who sacrificed everything for her daughter's success, and then resented that the sacrifice had worked. These were not first date revelations. These were 3 a.m. confessions, the kind that only emerged when exhaustion stripped away normal defenses and altitude made regular rules feel distant and irrelevant. At some point, without discussion, they moved closer, not touching, but near enough that body heat became shared. The city glittered below, indifferent to their presence. The wind carried suggestions of rain that continued not to fall. "Can I ask you something?" Victor said, his voice quieter now, more careful. "Yes. Why aren't you afraid of me?" The question surprised her into honesty. "What makes you think I'm not?" "Because everyone is afraid of me. Not obviously, not in ways they'd admit. But there's always calculation in how people interact with me, what they say, how they position themselves. Even casual conversation has strategy beneath it." He looked at her. "You don't calculate, you respond. It's unusual. Maybe I'm just better at hiding the calculation. No, I've spent my entire life reading calculation in others. You're doing something different." Serena considered the question seriously. Why wasn't she afraid? Victor Van Seren could damage her career with a word to the right board member, could make her life in Aurora Heights uncomfortable with minimal effort, could weaponize this rooftop conversation in dozens of ways if he chose. "I think," she said slowly, "that I've spent so long being careful that fear has stopped registering as useful information. I've protected myself so thoroughly that I no longer know what I'm protecting." "That's bleak." "Yes, also honest. Sometimes those are the same thing." Victor shifted position, angling toward her. "What would happen if you stopped protecting yourself?" "I don't know. That's what makes it frightening. But you're not frightened of me, specifically." Should I be? He smiled, but something serious moved behind it. Probably. I have a reputation for getting what I want and rarely considering collateral damage. Is that a warning? It's disclosure. I'm trying to be honest since you seem to value that. And what do you want, Victor? The question emerged more directly than she intended. His name felt strange in her mouth, intimate in a way that surnames prevented. They had crossed some invisible boundary, moved from formal strangers to people who used given names, and shared whiskey, and confessed to loneliness on rooftops where no one was supposed to witness. Right now, he asked. This, someone I can talk to without performing, without calculating 3 moves ahead. Just conversation with another person who understands that success and satisfaction aren't the same thing. That's remarkably modest for someone with your reputation. My reputation is excellent marketing. The reality is considerably more boring. Somehow I doubt that. Believe what you prefer. Everyone does. The rain finally arrived, not gradually, but all at once, as if the sky had been waiting for permission. Large drops struck the glass barriers and stone surfaces, creating immediate percussion. The rooftop's drainage system activated, channeling water through carefully designed routes that prevented flooding while maintaining aesthetic appeal. They should leave, return to their separate floors before they were soaked. Neither moved. Tell me something true, Victor said, rain beginning to darken his coat. Something you haven't told anyone else. Serena watched water cascade down the glass barrier, distorting the city into abstract light. The question was intimate and dangerous, exactly the kind of thing she should deflect with practiced charm. I'm not sure I know what's true anymore, she said instead. I've spent so long curating my life that I can't tell which parts are authentic and which are just well-chosen presentations. Sometimes I think I'm not a person, just a very successful exhibition of what a successful person should look like. Victor was quiet. Rain fell harder, soaking them both now. Her carefully styled hair came loose from its knot. His expensive coat darkened with water. They sat in the storm, 2 people who had everything except the ability to believe their own lives were real. I know exactly what you mean, he said finally, and something in his voice told her this was true. The hour had long passed. The rain showed no signs of stopping. Every reasonable impulse told Serena to end this now, before it developed into something that couldn't be easily undone. Instead, she asked, "Same time tomorrow?" Victor's smile was genuine and slightly surprised. Yes. They stood together, soaked and shivering, and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. They stepped inside. At the 47th floor, Serena exited without looking back. In her apartment, she stood dripping on marble floors, watching the city through rain-streaked windows. Something had shifted. Some carefully maintained distance had collapsed. She should feel alarmed, protective, concerned about consequences and complications. Instead, she felt awake for the first time in months. The rooftop had become something more than an escape. It had become a beginning. Chapter 2: Exposure. The rain continued for 3 days. Elysium City transformed under the weather. Its usual glitter softened into gray reflection. Traffic slowed. Streets emptied earlier. The city that never fully darkened now spent more hours in shadow, as if even neon surrendered to the weight of persistent rain. Serena worked from her apartment, communicating with museums and collectors through carefully composed emails that revealed nothing of her disrupted focus. A contemporary sculpture acquisition for a private collection in Singapore. Authentication concerns regarding a painting attributed to a minor surrealist. Negotiations with an artist whose work she wanted to feature in a group exhibition, exploring architecture and isolation. The irony of that last project was not lost on her. Between professional obligations, her thoughts returned to the rooftop with intrusive regularity. She replayed the conversation, analyzing what had been said and what remained unspoken. Victor's questions, his unexpected vulnerability, the way he had looked at her when she admitted she no longer knew which parts of herself were real. She had revealed too much, created intimacy where only distance was safe. And yet, when midnight approached on the 4th night, she found herself in the elevator, ascending toward the 60th floor. The rain had finally stopped. The rooftop garden glistened under minimal security lighting, surfaces reflecting accumulated water in dark mirrors. The city emerged from clouds, its familiar glitter returning with renewed intensity, as if the storm had been intermission rather than interruption. Victor was already there. He stood at the western barrier, looking toward the financial district where his family's corporate headquarters occupied an entire block. He wore dark clothes, his coat discarded on a nearby bench. When he heard her footsteps on wet gravel, he turned. "I wasn't certain you'd come," he said. "Neither was I. But you're here. Apparently, I make poor decisions after midnight." His smile acknowledged the deflection. "Then we have that in common." Serena joined him at the barrier, maintaining the same careful distance they had established during their first conversation. Rain had left the rooftop cleaner, stripping away the thin layer of urban residue that accumulated even at this height. Everything looked sharper, more defined, as if the storm had clarified boundaries that had previously blurred. "How was your week?" Victor asked, the question almost absurdly normal given their context. "Productive, yours. Tedious, board meetings, family obligations, the usual performance. Do you ever stop performing?" "Rarely, you." "Never," she admitted, "until recently." "What changed?" She considered the question seriously. What had changed? The insomnia had started months ago. The rooftop visits were more recent. But the shift, the genuine disruption to her carefully maintained equilibrium, had begun exactly 1 week ago, when Victor Van Seren had appeared in her private refuge and asked questions that required honest answers. I met someone who seems interested in the parts of me I usually hide, she said. Dangerous. Very. And yet you came back. And yet I came back. They stood in comfortable silence. This was new. Serena's professional life consisted of constant conversation, evaluation, negotiation. Silence was rare and usually uncomfortable, a gap that needed filling with appropriate commentary. But here, 60 floors above the city, with only Victor as witness, silence felt like its own kind of communication. I did something possibly stupid, Victor said eventually. Only possibly. Definitely stupid. I'm trying to soften the confession. He turned to face her directly. I researched you, not just the public biography, the deeper story, where you came from, how you built your career, the patterns in the art you choose to promote. Serena felt her professional mask slide into place, defensive instincts activating. That seems excessive for casual conversation. This isn't casual conversation. You know that. Then what is it? I'm not sure yet, but I wanted to understand you better, to see if the person on the rooftop matched the reputation. He paused. They don't. Disappointing. Fascinating. Your public work focuses on art that explores control, presentation, the construction of meaning through careful curation. But your personal collection, the pieces you actually own, those are different. Raw, emotionally immediate. Work that privileges feeling over composition. Heat rose in Serena's chest, part anger, part something more complicated. He had accessed information about her private collection, had crossed boundaries she had not explicitly stated, but assumed were understood. How did you find out about my personal collection? Her voice remained level through trained discipline. I know people who know people. It's a small world at certain altitudes. He must have seen something in her expression because he added, I'm not apologizing. You're right to be angry, but I'm also not pretending this is something casual that requires polite boundaries. I wanted to know who you actually are, so I looked. And what did you discover? That you're not nearly as controlled as you pretend. That beneath all the professional restraint is someone starving for exactly the kind of emotional chaos you help others avoid. He moved slightly closer. That we're more similar than I initially recognized. Serena should walk away. End this before it developed into genuine entanglement. Victor Van Seren was not someone who entered lives quietly. He was power and privilege and complication. Exactly the kind of disruption her carefully balanced existence could not absorb. You're right, she said. You should apologize. I won't. Then you're as arrogant as your reputation suggests. Probably. Does that change whether you'll keep coming to the rooftop? The question hung between them, direct and unapologetic. This was the moment, the decision point. She could retreat into professional distance, maintain the boundaries that had protected her for years. Treat this as a brief aberration in otherwise sensible judgment. Or she could stay. Tell me something, Serena said. Why does this matter to you? You could have dozens of relationships, people who would be thrilled to be seen with Victor Van Seren. Why invest this much attention in someone who isn't making it easy? Because easy is boring. Because most people want access to my name, my connections, my capacity to advance their interests. You want none of that. You don't know what I want. Then tell me. The challenge was clear. Reciprocal disclosure. He had revealed his research, his motivations, his interest. Now he wanted equivalent transparency. Serena looked out at the city, buying time. What did she want? The question felt almost impossibly large. She had spent decades pursuing professional success, building reputation, establishing herself as someone whose judgment others trusted. But personal desire, that had been deliberately suppressed, managed, curated into irrelevance. I want to feel something that isn't carefully controlled, she heard herself say. I want to make decisions that aren't strategic. I want to stop performing competence and just exist. Messy, uncertain, real. With me, I don't know. Maybe. You're the first person in years who seems interested in something other than what I can provide professionally. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how few people clear it. Victor moved closer, closing the distance she had maintained. Not touching, but near enough that she could feel his body heat, see the rain damage to his expensive shirt, notice the slight imperfection in his otherwise carefully maintained presentation. I'm going to be honest, he said, more honest than I usually allow myself. I'm attracted to you. Intellectually, aesthetically, emotionally. I want to know everything you usually hide. I want to see you make decisions that aren't strategic. And I'm selfish enough to want to be present when those decisions happen. That's quite a confession. I'm trying to match your transparency. Why? Because I think we could destroy each other or save each other. And I'm curious which it will be. The statement should have alarmed her. Instead, it felt like recognition. They were both standing at edges they had spent years avoiding. Both exhausted by performance. Both curious about what might exist beyond carefully maintained control. Dangerous, reckless. Exactly what she needed. I'm not looking for a relationship, Serena said, establishing parameters even as she stepped closer to the cliff edge. I don't do romance. I don't do public dating. I barely do private connection. Noted. I'm serious, Victor. I can't be someone's project. I can't be the complicated woman you try to fix or save, or whatever narrative you're constructing. I'm not interested in fixing you. I'm interested in knowing you. Those aren't as different as you think. Maybe, but I'm willing to risk the distinction. They stood close enough now that any observer would recognize this as intimacy rather than conversation. Serena felt her pulse accelerate, adrenaline, and attraction mixing into something chemical and persuasive. She had forgotten what this felt like, had deliberately avoided it for so long that the sensation felt both familiar and completely foreign. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "Absolutely. We barely know each other. Then we should fix that. I mean it, Victor. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you seem to think I am. Neither do I. We'll be disasters together." And then he kissed her, not tentatively, not with the careful approach of someone testing boundaries. He kissed her like someone who had decided that caution was less interesting than honesty, and honesty required action. Serena responded with the same directness. No strategic hesitation, no performance of reluctance or surprise, just immediate physical acknowledgement that this had been inevitable since their first conversation. The kiss deepened, became consuming. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer. She gripped his shirt, destroying whatever remained of its expensive perfection. They kissed like people who had been performing restraint for far too long and had finally received permission to stop. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor smiled. "Still think it's a terrible idea. Worse than before." "Good." They returned to the barrier, standing closer now, contact casual and continuous. Serena's mind worked through implications even as her body processed entirely different information. This was complicated. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of disruption she had spent years avoiding. And it felt extraordinary. "We need rules," she said. "Romantic. I'm serious. If we're doing this, whatever this is, we need boundaries." "Fine, propose your rules." Serena organized her thoughts, applying professional discipline to personal chaos. First, discretion. No one in the building can know. I will not become gossip in the place I live. Agreed. Though you understand discretion is complicated in Aurora Heights. Which brings me to second. If this becomes public, we end it immediately. No drama, no explanations. We simply stop. Harsh but clear, next. Third, honesty. If you're seeing other people, I need to know. I won't share you without transparency. I'm not interested in other people. Are you? No. Then we're exclusive by mutual disinterest in alternatives. Continue. Fourth, this doesn't affect our professional lives. You don't use your connections to advantage my career. I don't leverage your name for access. You realize that benefits you more than me, which is why I'm stating it explicitly. Victor nodded. Acceptable. Any other conditions? Just one. When this ends, and it will end, we handle it like adults. No revenge. No leverage. No using what we learn about each other as weapons. You're very confident this will end badly. I'm experienced enough to know that most things do. That's bleak, Serena. That's realistic. He was quiet for a moment, considering her terms. Then he extended his hand with mock formality. I accept your conditions. Shall we seal the agreement? She took his hand, but instead of shaking it, pulled him into another kiss. This one was slower, more exploratory, less about urgency, and more about learning the specific geography of another person's desire. When they separated, Victor's expression had shifted into something more serious. Can I add one condition of my own? Maybe. While we're doing this, we're actually doing it. No half measures. No keeping exits visible at all times. We commit to the disaster. That's not a condition. That's a philosophy. Then let's call it a request. Serena considered. What he was asking for was presence. Full engagement. The opposite of how she lived most of her life, always maintaining distance, always preserving the capacity to exit without damage. Terrifying, necessary. Exactly what she had come to the rooftop seeking. Agreed, she said. They stayed on the rooftop until nearly 4 a.m, talking and kissing, and occasionally just standing together, watching the city breathe below them. They discussed logistics, how to manage encounters without creating patterns that others might notice. Victor mentioned a private elevator that accessed the rooftop from his penthouse on 59. Serena suggested varying their timing to avoid establishing routine. They were two intelligent people applying strategy to something that resisted strategy. The irony was not lost on either of them. As dawn began its slow assertion on the eastern horizon, they descended separately. Victor first, giving Serena time to follow without creating the appearance of shared departure. In her apartment, Serena stood under hot water, letting the shower wash away rooftop rain and the physical evidence of kissing someone for the first time in 3 years. Her reflection in the steamed mirror looked simultaneously familiar and strange. She had broken every personal rule she had established for safe living, had engaged with exactly the kind of complication she had spent years avoiding, had committed to something with no clear outcome except eventual pain, and she felt more alive than she had in recent memory. Her phone buzzed with a message. Unknown number. Already breaking the rules. This is my private line. Save it. Use it. I'll see you tomorrow night. Same time. Different location. V. Serena saved the number, deleted the message, and fell into bed. For the first time in months, she slept. Chapter 3. Exhibition. Professional obligations had excellent timing for inconvenience. The Aurora Heights exhibition had been scheduled for months. A private showing of contemporary works exploring themes of observation, privacy, and urban isolation. 12 artists, 4 floors of the building's common areas, an exclusive guest list of collectors, critics, and residents wealthy enough to purchase pieces that cost more than most people earned annually. Serena had curated the exhibition as a favor to building management, who wanted to demonstrate Aurora Heights' commitment to culture while simultaneously increasing property values through aesthetic association. The work had been straightforward. Select pieces that challenged without offending. Create cohesive narrative flow. Arrange installations that photograph well for the inevitable social media documentation. Now, 2 weeks into her rooftop arrangement with Victor, the exhibition had transformed from professional obligation into potential exposure. The opening was scheduled for Saturday evening. Attendance was mandatory for anyone who wanted to maintain social standing in the building, which meant Victor would be there. And Serena would be there. Together, in public, for the first time since they had established their carefully bounded arrangement. "You're overthinking this," Victor said. They were in his penthouse, a space Serena had first visited 5 nights earlier when rooftop weather had turned hostile. The residence was surprisingly understated for someone of Victor's wealth. Contemporary without being cold. Comfortable without sacrificing design. The views were extraordinary, floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, offering perspectives of the city that made even Serena's excellent vantage point seem limited. "I'm thinking appropriate amounts," she replied, accepting the wine he offered. "We'll be in the same space for 3 hours. People will notice how we interact. People will notice that the curator and the building's owner exchange professional pleasantries. Nothing scandalous about that. You're not good at subtle. I'm excellent at subtle. I'm choosing not to employ it in private." They were in his bedroom, a space that had become increasingly familiar over the past 2 weeks. The arrangement they had established worked with surprising effectiveness. Rooftop meetings when weather permitted. His penthouse when it didn't. Careful timing. Separate arrivals and departures. No patterns that would register as unusual to building security or the apparently omniscient concierge. Serena had expected complications. Instead, she found ease. Victor was intelligent, perceptive, and genuinely interested in conversations that extended beyond the immediate physical. They talked about art and family, power and its corruptions, the specific loneliness that came from being admired for achievements that felt increasingly hollow. They also had sex that was athletic, creative, and surprisingly communicative. He learned her body with the same focus he apparently applied to business strategy. She discovered that control in professional life did not require control in intimate moments. They were good together, compatible in ways that both surprised and concerned her, because compatibility suggested potential for something more than a carefully bounded arrangement, and more meant vulnerability Serena was not certain she could afford. "You're doing it again," Victor said, sitting beside her on the bed. "Doing what?" "Retreating. I can see it happen. We're having a perfectly pleasant conversation, and then something shifts, and you're suddenly calculating exits." "I'm not." "You are. You do it every time we get too comfortable. Like comfort itself is a threat." Serena set down her wine, defensive instincts activating. We agreed to boundaries. This is me maintaining them. No, this is you panicking that you might actually enjoy something without reservations. Don't psychoanalyze me, Victor. I'm not analyzing, I'm observing. There's a difference. Semantics, accuracy. They sat in tense silence. This was new territory. Their previous 2 weeks had been remarkably friction-free, as if both were carefully avoiding anything that might disrupt the careful balance they had established. Now, with the exhibition forcing them into public proximity, underlying tensions surfaced. I'm not good at this, Serena said finally. At letting people see me without curation. You're asking me to be comfortable with something I've spent decades avoiding. I'm not asking you to be comfortable. I'm asking you to try. What if I can't? Then you can't. But you won't know unless you stop calculating worst-case scenarios long enough to discover what happens if things go right. Things don't go right, Victor. They go complicated, and then they go painful. And then you're left rebuilding boundaries you never should have dismantled. Is that experience talking or fear? Does it matter? He reached for her hand, a simple gesture that somehow carried more intimacy than their earlier physical intensity. It matters because I need to know if you're actually interested in this, or just temporarily curious about what you usually avoid. The question was fair. Serena had been asking herself the same thing for the past week. Was this genuine attraction, or simply the novelty of disruption? Was Victor specifically compelling, or was he just available when she had finally exhausted her capacity for isolation? I don't know, she admitted. I'm interested. I'm attracted. I enjoy our time together. But I also know myself well enough to recognize that I'm good at short-term intensity and terrible at sustained connection. Eventually, I'll retreat. It's what I do. What if I don't let you? You can't stop me from protecting myself. No, but I can make it more difficult. I can keep showing up. Keep asking questions you'd prefer to avoid. Keep making comfort feel less threatening than isolation. That sounds exhausting. Probably. But I think you're worth exhausting myself over. The statement landed with more weight than Serena knew how to process. She was accustomed to being valued for professional expertise, for her eye, her connections, her capacity to recognize which artists deserved attention and which collectors had taste worth cultivating. Personal value, the sense that someone might invest effort simply because they enjoyed her presence, that was foreign territory. You don't know me well enough to make that determination, she said. Then I'm making it based on incomplete information. I'll revise if necessary. You're absurdly confident. I'm interested. There's a difference. Serena kissed him, partly because she wanted to, and partly because continuing the conversation felt more vulnerable than physical connection. Victor responded, but pulled back before the kiss could develop into distraction. We should talk about the exhibition, he said. I'd rather not, which is exactly why we should. She sighed, recognizing he was right. Fine, what's your concern? No concern, just logistics. We'll be in the same space. People will expect me to comment on the work since my family owns the building. You'll be there in professional capacity. How do you want to handle it? Politely, professionally, like any other curator and property owner interaction. And if someone notices we have chemistry, we'll deny having chemistry. I'm not good at denial. Then practice. Consider it an acting exercise. Victor smiled, but something more serious moved behind it. I need to tell you something about the exhibition. One of the artists you selected, Raphael Knox, has history with my family. Serena's professional instincts activated immediately. Raphael Knox was one of the exhibition's featured artists, a luxury architect whose photography explored voyeurism and urban observation. His work was beautiful, unsettling, and perfectly suited to the exhibition's themes. What kind of history? She asked. Personal and professional. He had an affair with my sister-in-law 3 years ago. Nearly destroyed my brother's marriage. There was a very expensive lawsuit about proprietary design information Raphael allegedly used in a competing firm's project. It settled quietly, but the damage was done. My family considers him persona non grata, and you didn't mention this before because I wanted to see if you'd selected him based on merit or connection. You did. His work deserves to be shown. But my presence at an exhibition featuring his art will create conversation. Serena processed the information, frustration building. This is exactly the kind of complication I was trying to avoid. If your family has issues with Knox, your presence legitimizes him. People will interpret it as reconciliation or strategy or some other narrative that has nothing to do with the actual art. I know. So what do you want me to do? Remove his pieces. That's professionally unethical and creates its own set of questions. I don't want you to do anything. I'm giving you information so you're not surprised when people comment. People will do more than comment, Victor. They'll speculate. They'll gossip. They'll create stories about why Victor Van Seren is suddenly willing to share space with someone his family publicly condemned. Let them speculate. Easy for you to say. Your reputation absorbs scandal. Mine doesn't. Victor stood, frustration evident in his posture. What do you want from me, Serena? You want discretion, but you also want me to skip events because my presence complicates your professional life. You want boundaries, but you resent when I respect them. I'm trying to navigate this in a way that honors what you've asked for, but I'm starting to suspect nothing I do will be right. The assessment stung because it was partially accurate. Serena was asking for contradictory things, wanting connection without consequence, intimacy without vulnerability, the benefits of relationship without the risks that made relationships meaningful. You're right, she said. I'm being unfair. Come to the exhibition. Engage with Knox's work if you want. I'll manage any conversation that results. That's not what I'm asking for. Then what are you asking for? I'm asking if this, he gestured between them, is actually something you want, or just something you're trying on temporarily before returning to safer patterns. I don't know. Does that answer satisfy you? Not particularly, but it's honest. They stood in tense silence, the first genuine conflict of their 2-week arrangement stretching between them. Serena recognized this moment, the point where emotional risk exceeded comfort, where she would typically retreat, create distance, protect herself from potential pain by preemptively ending anything that might develop into actual importance. She could feel the old patterns activating, the professional cool, the strategic withdrawal, the careful reconstruction of boundaries that protected her from exactly this kind of uncertainty. I'm going to go, she said. Of course you are. Don't what? Don't notice that you're doing exactly what you always do. Don't point out that you're more comfortable with isolation than risk. Don't make this more significant than it is. Victor's expression shifted into something colder, more distant. Right. This is just casual, temporary. Nothing that requires actual emotional investment. That's what we agreed to. No, you proposed rules designed to prevent actual connection. I agreed because I wanted access to you and thought maybe if you felt safe enough, you'd eventually let me in. Apparently, that was optimistic. Serena felt anger rise, defensive and protective. You don't get to judge how I protect myself. You don't get to decide that my boundaries are neuroses that need fixing. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to be with you. But you won't let me. Because this is temporary. Because in 3 months or 6 months, you'll be bored, and I'll be damaged, and we'll both regret that we didn't maintain better boundaries. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because that's what always happens. With other people, not with me. You're not special, Victor. You're just current. The words landed brutally, designed to create distance. Victor's expression closed completely. The warm engagement she had been enjoying replaced by cool formality. Then I misunderstood the situation, he said. My apologies for overstepping. Serena wanted to take it back, wanted to admit she was scared and defensive, and saying things designed to wound, because that felt safer than admitting she was developing feelings she couldn't control. But the words wouldn't come. Pride and self-protection formed an effective barrier against honesty. I should go, she repeated. Yes, you should. She left his penthouse, descended to her own floor, and spent the rest of the night staring at the city, hatting herself for choosing safety over possibility. Chapter 4. Observation. The exhibition opened to precisely the kind of crowd Serena had anticipated. Wealthy residents dressed in understated elegance, collectors who measured their interest in potential acquisition value, critics who attended because their presence would be noted and their absence questioned. Everyone performing appreciation while calculating social advantage. Serena moved through the space in professional mode, answering questions about artistic intention and curatorial choices. She wore black, simple, expensive, designed to project authority without demanding attention. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her makeup was minimal. She had armored herself in aesthetic restraint, presenting the version of herself that felt safest when visibility was mandatory. Victor arrived 40 minutes into the event, accompanied by his brother Marcus and sister-in-law Catherine. The same Catherine whose affair with Raphael Knox had nearly destroyed her marriage. Serena recognized the strategic choice immediately. Victor was making a statement, demonstrating family unity, showing that whatever scandal Knox had caused had been absorbed and transcended. It was good tactics. It also made Serena's role infinitely more complicated. She watched Victor move through the exhibition with practiced social grace. He stopped at several pieces, appeared to genuinely engage with the work, spoke with other residents in ways that seemed warm rather than obligatory. He was performing, but the performance was excellent. When he reached Raphael Knox's photographs, large-scale images of Aurora Heights taken from external vantage points, showing lit windows and shadowed interiors, intimate moments captured from impossible distances, he stopped. The photographs were beautiful and invasive. They showed the building's residents in private moments they believed were unobserved. A woman dancing alone in her kitchen. A man standing at his window, drink in hand, expression devastated. Two people in an embrace that spoke of either reunion or goodbye. The images raised questions about privacy, observation, and the illusion of seclusion in a building made primarily of glass. They were perfect for the exhibition's themes. They were also deeply uncomfortable. Victor studied the photographs for several minutes. Serena watched from across the room, unable to interpret his expression. Then he turned and looked directly at her. Their eyes met, held. The connection lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it felt infinitely longer. In that brief exchange, Serena saw questions she didn't want to answer and emotions she had spent 2 days trying to suppress. Then Victor looked away, returning his attention to the photographs. Powerful work, a voice said beside her. Serena turned to find Raphael Knox himself, wine in hand, watching her with undisguised interest. He was handsome in the way architects often were angular features, expensive glasses, the kind of casual style that required significant effort to achieve. Yes, Serena agreed. That's why I selected them, even knowing the Van Seren family history. I curate based on artistic merit, not social politics. How refreshingly amoral. His smile suggested he found this amusing rather than offensive. Though I notice you're watching Victor quite intently for someone uninterested in politics. Serena's professional mask remained perfectly in place. I'm watching all the guests. It's my job to gauge response to the work. Of course. And his response interests you purely professionally. Is there a question in there somewhere? Raphael moved slightly closer, lowering his voice. Just observation. You two are performing disinterest with remarkable intensity, which usually indicates the opposite. Your photography is excellent, Mr. Knox. Your social analysis is presumptuous. Fair, though I should mention that Aurora Heights rewards observation. Everything here is performance, including privacy. The building sees everything. The question is who's paying attention. Before Serena could respond, he moved away, leaving her with distinct unease. Raphael Knox was perceptive and clearly enjoyed disruption. Exactly the kind of person who might notice what others missed and find entertainment in exposure. The evening continued. Serena answered questions, accepted compliments, facilitated introductions between artists and potential buyers. She was excellent at this, had been performing professional competence at events like this for 2 decades. Usually, it felt effortless. Tonight it felt exhausting. Victor approached near the end of the event, when the crowd had thinned and remaining guests were engaged in conversation that no longer required curatorial guidance. Ms. Cho, he said, voice perfectly professional. Thank you for the exceptional exhibition. The work is remarkable. Mr. Van Seren, I'm pleased you enjoyed it. They spoke like strangers, like two people whose only connection was architectural proximity and professional courtesy. Anyone observing would see nothing unusual, just appropriate interaction between curator and property owner. But Serena felt the strain, felt the weight of things unsaid and emotions carefully suppressed, felt the cost of choosing safety over honesty. The Knox photographs are particularly striking, Victor continued, though I imagine they make some residents uncomfortable. Great art often does. Indeed, the question is whether discomfort serves purpose or simply indulges the artist's desire to provoke. Sometimes those are the same thing. Victor's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. Perhaps, though I've always believed the best art reveals truth rather than simply disrupting comfort. And what truth do you see in these photographs? That privacy is performance. That we're all being observed more constantly than we acknowledge. That the things we believe are hidden are often perfectly visible to anyone paying attention. The conversation had moved beyond professional courtesy into something more personal. Serena recognized the subtext. Victor was talking about them, about her insistence on discretion, about the irony of demanding privacy in a building designed for observation. Some people value privacy regardless of its practical limitations, she said carefully. And some people use privacy as protection from actual connection. That's a rather personal observation for a professional conversation. You're right, my apologies. His tone remained polite, but disappointment was evident. Thank you again for your excellent work, Ms. Cho. I'm sure the building will benefit from the cultural prestige this exhibition provides. He walked away before she could respond. Serena remained in place, surrounded by art about observation and privacy, feeling more exposed than she had in years. The exhibition was a professional success. 3 pieces sold before the evening ended. Critics would write favorable reviews. Aurora Heights would receive exactly the cultural cachet building management had desired. And Serena felt hollow. She stayed late, supervising the catering staff's cleanup, checking that each piece was properly secured. Unnecessary tasks that prevented her from returning to her apartment, where she would have to confront what she was actually feeling. Still here, Elias Gray, the building's concierge, appeared with his characteristic quiet presence. He was perhaps 50, impeccably dressed, and possessed the particular quality of seeming both invisible and omniscient simultaneously. Just finishing, Serena said. The exhibition was excellent, though I suspect more interesting for what wasn't visible than what was displayed. Serena looked at him sharply. Meaning Aurora Heights rewards observation, as Mr. Knox noted. And sometimes what we try hardest to hide becomes most apparent to those paying attention. Is that a warning, Mr. Gray? Simply an observation, though I should mention that discretion is easier to maintain when emotions are less visible. He paused. Mr. Van Seren left approximately 15 minutes ago. He appeared thoughtful. I'm not sure why that concerns me. Of course not. Though if it did, you might be interested to know that rooftop access logs are reviewed quarterly, unless specific attention is requested. Currently, no one has requested attention. Serena understood immediately. Elias was telling her that their rooftop meetings had been noticed, but not reported. That he had capacity to protect their privacy or expose it, depending on circumstances. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I believe residents should understand what is observed and what remains private. Knowledge is useful, especially in buildings where observation is constant. And what do you observe, Mr. Gray? His smile was slight and professional. That some connections are worth the complications they create. And that fear of observation sometimes causes more damage than observation itself. He departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Serena with confirmation that their discretion had failed and uncertainty about what that failure might cost. She returned to her apartment, stood at her window, and acknowledged what she had been avoiding for 2 days. She had hurt Victor because she was scared, had pushed him away because connection felt more threatening than isolation, had chosen familiar loneliness over uncertain possibility, and now she needed to decide if safety was actually what she wanted. Chapter 5. Revision. Serena did not go to the rooftop for 3 days. She worked, fielded calls about the exhibition, negotiated with collectors interested in acquiring pieces, responded to interview requests from arts publications wanting her perspective on privacy and observation in contemporary urban environments. She did everything except acknowledge that she was avoiding the one person who had made Aurora Heights feel like something other than elegant imprisonment. On the 4th night, her phone buzzed with a message from Victor's private number. "I'm not going to chase you, but I am going to be on the rooftop at midnight if you want to talk. No expectations, no pressure, just availability. V." Simple, direct, leaving the decision entirely to her. Serena stared at the message for 20 minutes, calculating risks and potential outcomes. Every strategic instinct told her to let it end here. Clean break, minimal damage. Return to the carefully controlled existence she had maintained before Victor Van Seren had disrupted her insomnia with unexpected honesty. At 11:50, she was in the elevator ascending to the 60th floor. The rooftop was empty when she arrived. For a moment, she thought perhaps Victor had changed his mind, decided that her retreat had been final and clear. Then she saw him, standing at the eastern barrier where they had first spoken, looking out at the city with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. He turned when he heard her footsteps. No smile, no obvious emotion, just acknowledgement of her presence. "Hi," she said, feeling absurdly awkward. "Hi." They stood in silence. Serena had rehearsed various approaches during the elevator ride. Apologies, explanations, careful articulation of everything she had been feeling. Now, faced with Victor's neutral expression and her own uncertainty, all those prepared speeches dissolved. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for what I said, how I said it, for using cruelty as protection. Which part are you apologizing for specifically? The cruelty or the protection?" "Both, neither. I don't know. I'm bad at this." "At apologies. At letting people matter." Victor moved closer, but maintained distance. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you actually want this to end? Or are you just scared it might become important?" The question cut directly to the center of everything Serena had been avoiding. She could deflect, could construct elegant explanations that maintained defensive barriers, could protect herself from vulnerability by refusing to answer honestly, or she could try what Victor had been requesting since their first rooftop conversation. Actual honesty. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "of this becoming important, of you becoming important, of building something that feels real and then having it dissolve and being left worse than I was before. That's not an answer to my question. I don't want it to end. But I also don't know how to want something without immediately calculating how it will hurt when it's gone. So you heard it first, before it can hurt you. Yes. Victor was quiet for a long moment. I can't fix that for you, Serena. I can't make you trust that this might work. I can't prove that I'm different from whoever damaged you badly enough that protection feels more important than connection. I know, but I can tell you that I'm still here, still interested, still willing to try if you are. Why? Because I think we could be extraordinary together if you'd stop treating potential as threat. Serena felt tears threaten, an emotional response she hadn't allowed herself in years. I don't know how to do that. Then we figure it out together, messily, with mistakes, without guarantees. That sounds terrifying. It is, but staying safe sounds worse. He extended his hand, a simple gesture that somehow felt infinitely significant. An invitation, a choice, a chance to step towards something uncertain instead of retreating to something familiar. Serena took his hand. Victor pulled her close, wrapping her in an embrace that felt both protective and liberating. She let herself relax into it, allowed herself to accept comfort without calculating its eventual cost. I'm going to mess this up, she said against his shoulder. Probably I will too. And when I retreat again, I'll wait. I'll be frustrated, but I'll wait. That seems like terrible strategy. Good thing I'm not approaching this strategically. They stayed like that for several minutes, standing together on a rooftop officially closed to residents, choosing connection over safety. Eventually, they separated enough to look at each other. Victor reached up, gently brushing away tears Serena hadn't realized had fallen. Can we try something? He asked. Maybe. Can we stop treating this like a negotiation with predetermined terms and just see what happens? That's impossibly vague. It's also more honest than anything we've established so far. Serena considered. Everything in her training, her professional life, her carefully constructed existence resisted vagueness. She built her career on precise agreements and clear expectations. Ambiguity felt like failure, but precision hadn't made her happy. Control hadn't prevented loneliness. Safety had simply created a more elegant form of isolation. Okay, she said, no more rules, no more predetermined boundaries. We just try. That's terrifying for you. Absolutely. But you're willing. I'm willing to be willing. That's the best I can offer. Victor's smile was genuine and warm. I'll take it. They kissed with less urgency than before, more tenderness. This wasn't the consuming physical intensity of their first rooftop encounter. This was acknowledgement, recognition that something was shifting, becoming more significant than either had initially intended. When they broke apart, Victor said, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. He paused, choosing words carefully. The exhibition. Raphael Knox's photographs. One of them shows my study. From an external vantage point, I can't quite identify. It shows me alone, late at night, Looking, he stopped. Looking how? Lost, lonely, like someone performing success while feeling completely hollow inside. Serena understood immediately why this mattered. You're in the exhibition, your private moment on display, visible to everyone who attended. Yes, and the irony of spending 2 weeks insisting on discretion while being literally exhibited isn't lost on me. Did you know, before the opening? No, I recognized the photograph as my space, but I didn't realize I was visible in it until I stood directly in front of the piece. Knox is excellent at making subjects almost invisible until you know to look. That's invasive and unethical. I would never have included it if I'd known. I know, which is why I didn't mention it. The work is powerful. It deserves to be shown. And maybe having my privacy violated publicly will make me more sympathetic to why you value discretion. That's a remarkably generous interpretation. I'm trying to match your willingness to try. They talked for another hour, slowly reconstructing what Serena's defensive cruelty had temporarily damaged. Victor described the discomfort of seeing himself depicted in such vulnerable isolation. Serena admitted that her professional detachment was often just sophisticated avoidance of actual feeling. It was honest and difficult, and exactly what both needed. As dawn began its slow assertion, they descended together, no longer concerned with maintaining separate departures. In the elevator, Victor asked, "What happens now?" "I don't know. We figure it out." "That's vague. I'm trying something new." He smiled. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying. Also possibly right." The elevator stopped at his floor. He exited, then turned back. "Dinner tomorrow, in public. Actual date. No rules about discretion." Every protective instinct told Serena to refuse. Public dating meant visibility, meant acknowledging connection, meant accepting that people would notice and comment and speculate. "Yes," she said. The doors closed. Serena descended to her floor, entered her apartment, and stood at the window, watching the city wake. Something had shifted. Some carefully maintained barrier had collapsed. She felt vulnerable, exposed, uncertain about what came next. She also felt awake in ways that had nothing to do with insomnia. The rooftop had been a beginning. The exhibition had been a complication. This, whatever this was becoming, felt like actual possibility, terrifying and extraordinary in equal measure. Exactly what she needed. Chapter 6, Integration. Going public was less dramatic than Serena had anticipated. Aurora Heights residents noticed, of course. Noticed when Victor and Serena arrived at building events together. Noticed when they shared elevator rides without pretending not to know each other. Noticed when deliveries from high-end restaurants arrived at her floor with increasing frequency. But the response was not scandal. It was adjustment. Residents simply incorporated this new information into their understanding of building dynamics. Victor Van Seren was seeing someone. That someone was Serena Cho, the art curator. Interesting, unexpected, but not particularly shocking in a building where everyone had complications and most had secrets worth protecting. The discretion Serena had fought for turned out to be less necessary than she had feared. Aurora Heights ran on mutual assured exposure. Everyone had something to hide, which meant everyone had incentive to respect others' privacy. Still, visibility required adjustment. Serena was accustomed to being noticed professionally. Her work generated attention. Her curatorial choices were analyzed and discussed. But personal visibility was different. Now, when she entered the lobby, she was not simply Serena Cho, respected curator. She was Serena Cho, Victor's partner, half of a couple whose connection would be evaluated and interpreted. "You're overthinking again," Victor said. They were in her apartment, preparing for a dinner event honoring one of the exhibition artists. Serena wore midnight blue silk. Victor wore a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They looked, objectively, like people who belonged together. Successful, polished, the kind of couple that appeared in society photographs with captions about power and influence. "I'm thinking appropriate amounts," she replied, adjusting her earrings for the third time. "You've changed those twice. They were fine initially. They're too dramatic. They're perfect. You're nervous." "I'm not nervous. I'm adjusting." Victor moved behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "To what?" "To people seeing us together. To being evaluated as part of a couple instead of an individual. To wondering if my professional credibility will be affected because I'm sleeping with someone who owns the building where I curated an exhibition. That's a lot of anxiety for a dinner. Welcome to my internal experience." He rested his hands on her shoulders, the gesture both grounding and intimate. "You're still an individual, Serena. Being with me doesn't erase your identity or accomplishments. Anyone who questions your professional credibility because of who you're dating is revealing their own biases, not your inadequacies. Logically, I know that. But emotionally, I'm remembering every way connection has cost me credibility before." Victor turned her to face him. "Tell me." "Tell you what?" "Who hurt you badly enough that you're still protecting yourself years later." Serena felt resistance rise immediately. This was precisely the kind of vulnerability she had spent decades avoiding. Revealing old damage meant exposing the foundations of current defenses. It meant allowing Victor to see not just who she was now, but who she had been when she was less controlled and more breakable. "It's not relevant," she said. "It's completely relevant. You're terrified of being seen as half a couple instead of a whole person. That fear came from somewhere specific. Victor, I'm not going to push, but I am going to point out that you're asking me to be patient with your retreats while refusing to explain where they come from." He was right. Frustratingly, completely right. She was demanding understanding while withholding context, expecting him to navigate her defenses without providing the map. His name was David, she said finally. I met him when I was 30. He was a collector, wealthy, connected, interested in my work, or so I thought. But he was actually interested in using my eye and credibility to advance his own collection's value. He wanted me to promote certain artists he had invested in, wanted to leverage my professional reputation for his financial gain. She paused, old anger surfacing. I didn't realize for almost 2 years. By the time I understood, my professional recommendations had been compromised. My judgment was questioned. It took 5 years to rebuild credibility that had been damaged by associating with someone who saw me as tool rather than person. Victor's expression shifted into something cold and protective. He used you. Yes, and you think I'm doing the same thing. No, not rationally, but the pattern is familiar. Powerful man, professional woman, public relationship. Eventually, my judgment gets questioned and your reputation remains intact. Except I'm not using your professional expertise for personal gain. I'm not asking you to compromise your standards. I'm just here, wanting to be with you. I know, but knowing and feeling are different things. What would help? What can I do to prove this is real and not strategic? Serena considered the question seriously. What would help? What proof could Victor offer that he saw her as partner rather than asset? Nothing, she said finally. There's no proof. I either trust you or I don't. And trust isn't logical. It's a choice I make despite risk. Can you make that choice? I'm trying. Victor pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. That's enough. Trying is enough. They stayed like that for several minutes, finding steadiness in each other before facing public scrutiny. The dinner was professionally successful. The artist whose work they were honoring gave a gracious speech. Collectors committed to future acquisitions. Critics wrote favorable coverage, and Serena navigated the evening with Victor beside her, answering questions about the exhibition while he spoke with museum board members, occasionally catching his eye across the room and finding reassurance in his steady presence. Afterward, back in her apartment, they stood at the window, watching the city settle into its nightly rhythm. That wasn't terrible, Serena admitted. High praise. I'm serious. I expected to feel diminished. Instead, I felt supported. Good, that's how it should feel. This is new for me. Having someone who shows up without needing anything in return. Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere. Serena turned to face him. Don't promise that. You can't know what will happen. You're right. I can't promise forever. But I can promise now. I can promise that right now, in this moment, I choose to be here, with you, fully. And I'll keep choosing that until either of us decides differently. That's still terrifying. Would you prefer I lie and claim certainty I don't have? accept honest uncertainty over false security. She kissed him, grateful for his willingness to meet her where she was. Instead of demanding she arrive somewhere she wasn't ready to reach. They made love with the city lights as backdrop, finding rhythm and connection that felt increasingly familiar. Afterward, lying tangled together, Serena felt something she hadn't expected. Peace, not the controlled calm of carefully managed existence, not the aesthetic serenity of perfectly curated space. Actual peace that came from being fully known and still accepted. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said into the darkness. Victor's hand tightened on her waist. "You think?" "I'm afraid to be certain. Certainty feels like vulnerability. It is vulnerable. It's also honest. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have tried. We'll have been honest and vulnerable and fully present. That's worth something even if it ends." Serena considered this. Was honest effort worth the potential pain of ending? Every protective instinct said no, said that prevention was superior to recovery, that avoiding pain was wiser than risking it. But those instincts had also left her alone in a beautiful apartment, curating other people's emotional expression while suppressing her own. "I love you," she said, removing the qualifier, making it certain, making it real. "I love you too." Simple words, common sentiment. But in that moment, 60 floors above a city that never stopped watching, they felt revolutionary. Chapter 7, Surveillance. The photographs appeared 3 weeks later, not in tabloids or gossip sites. In the building's private resident newsletter, a monthly publication that covered Aurora Heights events, amenities updates, and community news. The newsletter typically featured tasteful photographs of building events, exhibition openings, charity fundraisers, seasonal celebrations in the lobby, professional documentation that made Aurora Heights look like a community of cultured, engaged residents who chose to live together rather than simply occupying proximate, expensive boxes. This month's edition included a full-page spread titled Aurora Heights After Dark, Rooftop Romance. The photographs were artistic, black and white, beautifully composed. They showed 2 people on the rooftop at various times over several weeks, talking, kissing, standing together watching the city. The faces were visible. The subjects were unmistakable. Victor and Serena. Their private rooftop meetings, documented and published. Serena stared at the newsletter in her kitchen, coffee going cold beside her, trying to process what she was seeing. Someone had been watching. Someone had been photographing. Someone had decided their privacy was less important than creating compelling content. Her phone rang. "Victor, tell me you're seeing this," he said, voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm seeing it. I'm calling building management. This is unacceptable, invasive, potentially illegal depending on consent laws for photography in semi-public spaces." Who took them? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Serena forced herself to think professionally, applying analytical distance to personal violation. The photographs were excellent quality, artistic composition, someone with genuine skill rather than simple surveillance equipment. The angles suggested multiple sessions, different vantage points, patient observation. Raphael Knox, she said suddenly. What? Look at the aesthetic. Look at how they're composed. These match his style, his exhibition photographs, the way he captures intimate moments from distance. Victor was quiet for a moment. You're right. This is his work. Why would he do this? Because I humiliated his career 3 years ago when his affair with my sister-in-law became public. Because he's still angry. Because he saw an opportunity for revenge and took it. Serena felt violation transform into rage. He used my exhibition. I gave him platform, and he repaid that by invading my privacy. Our privacy, Victor corrected, and he's going to regret it. What are you going to do? Legally, everything possible. Professionally, I'm going to make sure he never shows work in any venue that values my family's patronage. That's vindictive. That's proportional. He violated our privacy for public entertainment. He gets to experience proportional consequences. Part of Serena agreed. Wanted revenge. Wanted Knox to suffer for reducing her careful privacy to newsletter content. But another part, the professional part, that understood how quickly vindictive responses could spiral into mutual destruction, urged caution. Don't destroy his career, she said. That makes us as bad as him. I disagree, but I'll consider your perspective. They talked for another 20 minutes, processing violation and planning response. Victor wanted immediate legal action. Serena wanted to understand motive before reacting. They compromised on gathering information first, action second. After the call ended, Serena reread the newsletter. The photographs told a story. 2 people finding connection on a rooftop designed for observation. Intimacy developing in space, officially closed for privacy. The irony was sharp and intentional. Knox had used their presumed privacy to comment on privacy's impossibility in Aurora Heights. The building that promised discretion had produced perfect documentation of its failure. As art, it was effective commentary. As violation, it was unforgivable. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Did you enjoy the exhibition? I thought you'd appreciate the thematic consistency. Privacy as performance. Observation as inevitability. Your relationship made excellent subject matter. R.K. Raphael Knox, confirming authorship, demonstrating pride. Serena felt rage sharpen into focus. She could respond with anger, could threaten legal action, could mirror Victor's desire for professional destruction, or she could do something more effective. She called Elias Gray. The concierge answered immediately. as if he had been expecting her call. "Miss Cho, I assume this is regarding the newsletter. You knew about the photographs. I review all building publications before distribution. I saw them. I raised concerns. I was overruled by the community board, who felt the content was newsworthy and artistically valuable. You could have warned us. I considered it, but I suspected warning would simply delay inevitable conversation rather than prevent it." Serena forced herself to think strategically. "What do you know about how Knox accessed the rooftop to take these photographs?" "Mr. Knox has not had rooftop access privileges during the time frame these photographs represent." "Then how?" "However, building security footage shows regular late-night access to the 58th floor common area, which has external balconies facing the rooftop. The angles in the photographs are consistent with that vantage point." "Is there footage of him taking the photographs?" "There is footage of him occupying that space with professional camera equipment on multiple nights over 3 weeks." "Can that footage be obtained?" "For what purpose?" "Legal action. Knox violated our privacy. We need evidence." Elias was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Cho, I can provide that footage, but I should inform you that pursuing legal action will create significantly more public attention than the newsletter photographs. Privacy lawsuits require disclosure, media coverage. Exactly the visibility I believe you've been trying to avoid." He was right. Legal action meant public spectacle, meant confirming that the photographs represented something worth protecting, meant trading newsletter exposure for citywide attention. "What would you recommend?" she asked. "I would recommend considering whether Mr. Knox's motivation was purely vindictive or potentially more complex." "Explain." Ralph L. Knox submitted those photographs to the newsletter with accompanying text describing them as artistic commentary on urban observation and privacy's impossibility in modern architecture. He positioned them as extension of his exhibition work, not as gossip or exposure. That's rationalization, perhaps, but it suggests his primary motivation was artistic statement rather than personal revenge. The revenge was secondary benefit. Serena processed this. Knox had framed their violation as art, had used their privacy to make broader commentary. It was sophisticated rationalization, but it was also consistent with his previous work. "That doesn't make it acceptable," she said. "No, but it might make legal response less effective than professional consequence. Such as you, as a respected curator, publishing analysis of Knox's work that questions the ethics of his methodology. Such as raising industry conversation about consent and observation in contemporary photography. Such as making his artistic choices subject to same scrutiny he applied to you. It was elegant revenge. Professional rather than legal. Using her credibility to damage his reputation in ways that felt proportional to his violation. "I'll consider it," Serena said. "I thought you might." I've taken the liberty of compiling examples of Knox's previous work that raise similar ethical questions. I'll send you the file. Why are you helping me? Because Aurora Heights functions best when residents address grievances proportionally rather than destructively. Mr. Van Seren's inclination is toward professional destruction. Yours is toward strategic response. I prefer your approach. After the call ended, Serena received Elia's file. 15 examples of Knox's previous work, all featuring subjects photographed without explicit consent, all raising questions about voyeurism, ethics, and artistic license. She spent 3 hours analyzing the material, constructing arguments, building the foundation for professional critique that would damage Knox's reputation more effectively than any lawsuit. When Victor arrived that evening, she presented her plan. "You want to write about him instead of suing him?" he asked, skeptical. "I want to make his ethical choices the subject of professional conversation. I want to raise questions about consent in contemporary photography. I want to damage his reputation through legitimate critique rather than legal action that will make us more visible than the original photographs. That's more subtle than I prefer, but more effective." Knox positioned this as art. "I'm going to respond as a curator and demonstrate that his art fails ethical standards. That kind of professional critique will follow him for years. Lawsuits settle and fade. Critical analysis becomes part of permanent record." Victor considered this. "You're thinking strategically. I'm thinking like someone who understands how reputations are actually built and destroyed. Legal action is blunt force. Professional critique is precision. I like it, though I still want to make his life difficult in other ways, such as ensuring museum boards I influence understand that featuring Knox's work will affect their relationship with the Van Seren Foundation, such as making sure collectors I know receive information about his ethical questionability. Nothing illegal, just strategic information sharing. It was vindictive. It was also proportional to Knox's violation. "Okay," Serena agreed. "We respond both ways. I handle professional critique. You handle strategic networking. We make him regret using us as subject matter." They spent the evening drafting responses. Serena wrote the foundation of her critical essay, analyzing Knox's work through ethical frameworks he had consistently ignored. Victor contacted board members and collectors, beginning conversations that would shift Knox's professional trajectory. By midnight, they had established coordinated response that felt proportional rather than excessive. "How do you feel?" Victor asked. "Violated, angry, but also more certain." "About what?" "About us." Knox tried to expose our relationship as scandal. Instead, he just documented that we found something real in a building designed for performance. The photographs don't embarrass me. They show two people actually connecting. That's not shameful. Victor pulled her close. No, it's not. I'm still furious. He violated our privacy. Me too, but you're right. The photographs show something worth protecting. Not because it's scandalous, but because it's genuine. They stood together at her window, looking out at the city that had witnessed their rooftop meetings without judgment. Aurora Heights watched everything. The question was never whether privacy existed. The question was what you did when observation became public. Serena had spent years avoiding this exact situation, had constructed her entire life around preventing exposure. Now, faced with documentation of her private connection, she discovered something unexpected. She wasn't ashamed. The photographs showed vulnerability, showed her letting someone see her without curation, showed moments of genuine emotion in a life she had designed to minimize emotional risk. Knox had meant to embarrass her. Instead, he had created evidence that she was capable of more than professional competence. She was capable of love, messy, uncertain, completely real, and that was worth every complication it created. Chapter 8, Resolution. Serena's essay, published 6 weeks later in a prominent arts journal known for rigorous critical analysis. The piece was titled Observation Without Consent, Ethics and Contemporary Photography. It examined Raphael Knox's work within broader context of surveillance culture, voyeurism, and artistic responsibility. The analysis was thorough, intellectually rigorous, and devastatingly critical. She did not mention the rooftop photographs explicitly. Did not need to. Industry insiders understood immediately what had prompted her analysis. The essay became required reading in photography ethics courses. Art blogs featured extensive discussion. Knox's gallery representation released a statement defending artistic freedom while carefully distancing themselves from specific methodological questions. Victor's strategic networking was equally effective. Museum boards reconsidered planned exhibitions. Collectors withdrew acquisition interest. Knox remained employable, but his trajectory shifted from ascending star to controversial figure whose work required extensive contextual justification. It was proportional revenge, professional consequence rather than personal destruction. Knox responded with a public statement, claiming Serena's watching was motivated by personal grievance rather than somewhere ethical concern. The statement's closure created brief attention. Depends faded. Professional enough to approve faded with directly analysis. Knox's attempt to dismiss her argument as vindictive only he questioned reigned out his judgment. 3 months after the news, he stood. Raphael Knox left Elysium City for a teaching position in Europe. Not fleeing exactly, but definitely relocating to a professional dick that had made his continued prominence exhibition. Forward. On a space Serena, reading the announcement on his phone. They were on the rooftop, their rooftop, watching sunset paint your presence in shades of amber and reconstruction. You don't get to space no longer felt forbidden, intimate moments. It indicates the opposite. A place they had are off despite surveillance, simultaneous exposure. He departed despite every reason to retreat. Ability, Serena said. Serena feels sorry for him. Sorry, avoidance, talented. His work was genuinely innovative, but he couldn't separate artistic vision from you to compromise responsibility. Don't. That's a tragic flaw. You're more generous than the photo. I'm not generous. I'm just aware that talent and judgment are different things. Knox had one, but not the other. Victor wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Without consent, judgment. I have something to tell you. That sounds ominous. Not ominous. Just significant. He paused. I'm stepping back from the Van Seren Corporation. Not leaving entirely, but reducing my operational role. I'm tired of board meetings and strategic decisions that don't actually interest me. I want to do something different, such as I'm funding an arts foundation, supporting emerging artists who need patronage without strings, creating opportunities that don't require compromising artistic vision for commercial viability. Serena turned to look at him directly. That's a dramatic change. It's overdue. I've spent 20 years doing what was expected, building what my father started. Performing success will be disasters together. Want. You showed me if this, in choosing what feels real over what looks impressive. I showed you that. You chose professional risk over safe silence when you published that essay. You chose genuine connection over protective isolation when you kept coming back to this rooftop. You keep choosing authenticity even when it's complicated. That's inspiring. Serena felt emotion rise, unexpected and powerful. I'm not sure I deserve that much credit. I was terrified the entire time. Being terrified, but doing it anyway, that's courage. That's what I want more of in my life. They kissed as the sun completed its descent, leaving the city to its nightly transformation. The rooftop lights activated automatically, creating pools of illumination that made the space feel both public and intimate. I love you, Victor said, completely, without reservation, in ways that probably aren't strategic or safe. I love you too, even though it still terrifies me sometimes. Good, if it stopped being terrifying, we'd probably be performing rather than living. They stayed on the rooftop until nearly midnight, talking about Victor's foundation plans, Serena's upcoming exhibition in Singapore, the strange trajectory that had brought them from careful strangers to people who could imagine shared futures. When they finally descended, they went to Victor's penthouse together. No separate arrivals, no strategic timing, just two people who lived in the same building and had stopped pretending their connection required hiding. In his bedroom, with the city spread below them in all directions, they made love with the particular intensity that came from choosing each other despite every reason to protect themselves. Afterward, lying tangled together, Serena felt something shift, some final defensive barrier dissolving. "Move in with me," Victor said. She tensed immediately. "What?" "Move in. Officially. Stop maintaining two residences when you spend most nights here anyway." "That's a big step." "It's an honest step. We're already living together unofficially. I'm just suggesting we stop pretending otherwise." Serena's mind worked through implications. Moving in meant public acknowledgement, meant combining lives in ways that couldn't be easily undone, meant trusting that this would last beyond the initial intensity. Every protective instinct screamed resistance. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay. Yes, I'll move in. Not immediately. I need time to handle my lease and logistics. But yes." Victor pulled her closer, his smile visible in the darkness. "That was easier than expected. Don't get used to it. I'm still terrified of commitment and will probably panic multiple times during the moving process. I'll be patient." "You say that now." "I mean it. Panic all you want. I'm not going anywhere." Serena kissed him, grateful for his willingness to accept her complications without trying to fix them. They fell asleep wrapped together, the city glittering beyond the windows like a promise of everything that existed beyond careful control. Epilogue: Curated Lives. 6 months later, Serena stood in the main gallery of Victor's Arts Foundation, watching young artists install their work for the foundation's inaugural exhibition. The space was perfect. Light flooded through carefully designed windows. Wall surfaces invited experimentation. Equipment and materials were available without complicated application processes. Artists could create without compromising vision for commercial viability. Victor had built something genuinely valuable, something that prioritized artistic development over financial return. He appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "What do you think?" "I think you should have done this years ago. I needed proper motivation." "I'm motivation. You're proof that choosing authenticity over performance actually works." Serena accepted the coffee, watching a young sculptor position her work with careful attention to spatial relationship. The piece explored isolation in connected spaces, human figures reaching toward each other across divides they couldn't cross. "That one's good," Serena said, gesturing toward the sculpture. "You think we should acquire it for the permanent collection. I think you should let her finish installing before you start planning acquisition." Victor smiled. "I'm enthusiastic. You're eager to prove your foundation supports genuine talent." "That too." They stood together, watching artists transform empty space into meaningful exhibition. Serena felt contentment that had nothing to do with professional achievement and everything to do with standing beside someone whose presence made even ordinary moments feel significant. Her phone buzzed. Message from Elias Gray. Delivery arriving at penthouse in 20 minutes. Thought you'd want to know. E.g. She showed Victor the message, expecting something. No, it's you. They left the foundation and returned to Aurora Heights. The building that had witnessed their beginning now felt like home rather than elegant imprisonment. They greeted residents in the lobby, rode the elevator together without strategic separation, entered the penthouse that was now officially theirs rather than his. The delivery was a large framed photograph, Raphael Knox's Rooftop series, all of them beautifully matted and framed, with a note. These belong to you. They were never mine to exhibit without permission. I'm sorry for the violation. The work is good, but the method was wrong. I hope someday you'll accept this as apology rather than simply evidence of my poor judgment. R.K. Serena stared at the photographs. The images that had felt violating 6 months ago now looked different. They showed two people finding each other, taking risks, choosing connection over safety. What do you want to do with them? Victor asked. She considered. They could destroy them, could store them away, could treat them as unwelcome documentation of privacy violated, or they could acknowledge what the images actually showed. We keep them, she said, but we don't display them publicly. They're ours, private documentation of something real. You've forgiven him. I've accepted that his motivation was complicated, artistic, and vindictive in equal measure. The apology doesn't erase the violation, but it suggests he learned something. Victor wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them looking at the photographs. You're remarkable. I'm trying to be less defensive and more honest. Sometimes that looks like forgiveness. Only sometimes. Usually it looks like panic and strategic retreat. But I'm working on it. They hung one photograph in their private study. The image of them standing together on the rooftop, city spread below. Body language suggesting both intimacy and independence. Two people choosing to occupy space together while remaining whole individually. That evening, they hosted dinner for friends. Not a formal event, just people they genuinely enjoyed gathered in space that felt welcoming rather than impressive. Mara Solis arrived with her latest partner, someone charismatic and clearly temporary. Jackson Rains brought thoughtful questions about Victor's foundation. Isla Monroe offered gallery contacts for artists who might benefit from foundation support. Elias Gray had somehow known to send flowers that morning, tasteful arrangements that felt celebratory without being excessive. As the evening progressed, Serena watched people move through the penthouse with ease and genuine connection. This was different from the carefully curated events she had attended for years. No one was performing. No one was calculating advantage. Just people enjoying each other's company in space that invited authenticity. Later, after guests had departed and they were cleaning up together, Victor asked, "Happy?" "Yes," which still surprises me sometimes. "Why?" "Because I spent so long believing happiness required perfect control, that if I managed everything carefully enough, I could prevent pain and achieve satisfaction. And now I think happiness requires accepting that control is illusion, that the best things happen when you stop trying to curate your life and just live it." Victor smiled. "That's very evolved for someone who literally curates for a living. I'm learning to separate professional skill from personal philosophy. Turns out they're different things." They finished cleaning and moved to the bedroom. Through the windows, Aurora Heights spread below them, 60 floors of carefully constructed lives and calculated presentations. But here, in their space, presentation had dissolved into something more honest. "I have a question," Victor said, as they prepared for bed. "Ask. Do you regret it? Any of it? The rooftop meetings, the exposure, the complications." Serena considered seriously. Did she regret choosing vulnerability over safety? Regret letting Victor see her without curation? Regret building something real instead of maintaining beautiful isolation? "No," she said. "I don't regret any of it. Even the difficult parts taught me something about choosing authenticity over protection. Good, because I was worried you might eventually decide safe was better than real. I might still panic and try to retreat. I know, but you'll come back, you always do. How can you be so certain? Because you're braver than you think, and because we're good together. You know it. I know it. Eventually, you'll stop being surprised by that fact." Serena kissed him, grateful for his patience with her persistent uncertainty. They fell asleep wrapped together, the rooftop visible through the windows if they chose to look. But they didn't need to. The rooftop had served its purpose, had given them space to begin something that no longer required secrecy or special location. It had given them each other, and everything that followed was simply learning to build something lasting from that extraordinary beginning. The city glittered below. Aurora Heights watched with its 1,000 eyes. Secrets moved through hallways and elevators, behind closed doors and in shadowed corners. But some secrets stopped being secrets and became simply truth. Two people who had found each other in a building designed for observation had discovered that being seen, truly seen, was less frightening than spending a lifetime hidden. They had curated beauty for others. Now they were learning to live beautifully themselves. Messy, imperfect, completely real, exactly as it should be. The end